Here we
Wow.
go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MT4MH Studios, where we spread our love and we share our ketogenic lifestyles. This is the Find Your Keto Show, and I'm your host, Stephen T. Today, we have a very special guest. He's not just a big part of my personal keto journey, he's a well known celebrity, someone who has changed the way thousands approach diet and health. He's a cancer survivor, a best selling author, a filmmaker, and the creator of the NSNG diet. That's right, he's the no sugars, no grains guy, which is a movement that has helped countless people break free from sugar addiction and achieve a healthier lifestyle. You might know him from his book and podcast titled Fitness Confidential. You might know him from his eye opening documentaries, Fat, a documentary, and Fat, a documentary too, and his most recent film, Dirty Keto. Or perhaps you saw him in his modeling days when he shared an intimate moment with a conch shell. He's also the founder of Pure Vitamin Club, Pure Coffee Club, and NSNG Foods featuring ultra-fat nut butters. That's right, it's the one, the only, Vinnie Tortorich. And that's Vinnie spelled with I-E. There's no wimpy Y for this guy. Vinnie, how are you today?
Stephen, I mean, when I hear that introduction, it sounds like you're making it up. Right? Like I never think about me ever. And then all of a sudden someone goes, he's done movies, he's written books, he's climbed mountains, and I don't know what else you said there. But he's got a coffee. And I sit there and go, wow, I sound like the guy that created Virgin Records, right? He's like, hey, he flies balloons and he builds airlines, and I don't know. It's just weird when you think of, you don't think you're affecting anyone, right? Like it's like, oh, I'm just sitting here in my little cave, yapping into the ether. And then I hear someone like you say, hey, this guy helped me. And I'm like, man, we didn't even meet until like 2 weeks ago, right? It was like a chance meeting over in DC, right?
Right, yeah, we met at the Metabolic Revolution rally. You were one of the speakers there.
Yeah.
Your speech, I don't know if you could tell, but you were the most dynamic speaker there. You were the only one that got up there, grabbed the mic, and just kind of paced back and forth and did everything naturally, where everybody else had something prepared. And you captivated me, and you captivated the whole audience. The audience paid more attention to you than they did anybody else.
I appreciate hearing that, but we have to be honest, right? And everyone else was an MD, except for my friend Nina Teichos, who's a PhD. I thought Nina did her little speech because she was emceeing the event. Folks, if you want to read a really good book, it's called Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teichos. And Nina and I have gotten very close over the years. And she went up there and she did a rally style speech right at the beginning, I thought. And she was like, she was doing the thing where, in a rally, you're supposed to ask questions to the audience. And can you hear that noise up there?
I do. Yeah, I do hear that.
Can we pause this for a second? Well, no,
yeah.
There it goes. I don't know how often that's going to happen, but there's a guy doing work upstairs. So
okay,
let's hope that doesn't happen too often.
All right.
And if it does, we'll just cut through it. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Nina was doing a thing where, do you think anything was changed? And the audience went, no. And that's what a rally is supposed to be. Right? Like when they wrote to me and said, hey, would you like to come and be part of a rally? I said, yes. And then they said, prepare a 5-minute speech. And I was like, okay, yeah, they just want me to go up and do rah-rah for 5 minutes and then get off, right? And then I looked at all of the other people on that dais besides me. And I said to a friend of mine, and this is not going to be that good. And he said, well, why do you think that? And I also said it to my wife. I said, this is not going to be that good. And my wife said, why? I said, because they have some of the most brilliant minds in the world going up there, but these guys don't know how to rally. They don't know how to rally a crowd. And I even told my wife before I left the house, I said, when Robert Lustig or Chris Palmer or Mark Cucuzella, all people that have been on my show, Cucuzella I consider a close friend. I know all of these people. They only have the ability to read something off of a piece of paper. And I knew that they were going to fall back on their crutch of low carb is the best, blah, 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 blah. And if you notice, Stephen, almost every person said exactly the same thing. And to my point, everyone had their rally signs around their knees. No one was going, yeah, holding the signs up. Everyone kind of had them around their knees going, okay, we just heard the last person talk about this. Now this person's talking about this. I wish they would have consulted me on who they should have had up there, right? It would have been a much different crowd. Unfortunately, I don't think Sean Baker would have shown up, right? I don't think Ken Berry would have shown up. These are the people they need, guys that can rah-rah a crowd.
Yeah, Ken Berry was originally scheduled to be there, but I think something came up and he couldn't make it. Yeah,
probably the fact that he had to travel and there was no money is what probably came up. I'm just being honest. I can't be anything other than honest. I'm going to be honest with you. We all get paid to speak. That's how, we can't just go willy-nilly through life and not make money. So if this thing wasn't exactly 2 hours from where I woke up that morning in my house, there's no way in hell they would have gotten me. If I was still living in LA, the cheapest they would have gotten me was you got to pay flight and hotels, and they didn't have that kind of money.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right. So I'm just being honest as, it's like, wait, Ken Berry is sitting there going, wait, they want me to go up for 4.5 minutes and they're not going to pay my flight and my hotel. I don't know that to be a fact, but I would guess that had something to do with it. Right. So I'm just telling you the background of what goes on. I know this is not the conversation you want to have, but this is the one we're having. But I think it's unfair to say that mine was the best because I've been working crowds for 25 years, right? I knew to go up there, pull the mic out of the podium stand and do a Chris Rock style walk back and forth and yell things into a mic. Right. I knew that that's what needed to be done. So that's what I did. So there you have it.
And that's why you captivated the audience so well. Because I remember looking around during your speech and everybody had their eyes locked on you and everybody was listening.
And there was response, right? There was laughter, yeah. There was clapping, there was like, right. Yeah, and that kind of thing. I really wish they would have consulted me on who to get there. The problem is they didn't have the money to get the people there, right? To get the right names there. Right. And I've been on the stage with a lot of these people. Not many of them. Georgia Eads, I've had in 2 of my movies, right? I love Georgia. She's like, she's become like a sister to me. And I give Georgia a lot of credit. She's up there dancing and doing all the stuff. But Georgia is a doctor who has facts. She's one of the smartest people I know. But she's a soft-spoken woman. Think about the people who can rally people. Jesse Jackson would rally a crowd. Didn't matter what came out of his mouth.
Right.
He would rally a crowd, right? Muhammad Ali could rally. All these people, you think Louis Farrakhan would get up there, rally a crowd. I don't talk politics, but look at what's going on with the current political thing. One candidate is going, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to be kind and seat at the table and whatever Kamala says, right? And it's all kind and friendly, which is good. Trump is out there getting his ears shot off, yelling, fight, fight, fight.
Right.
He rallies the crowd. Love him or hate him, love or hate Kamala, you look at the difference. If Kamala would just get up there and start yelling, fight, 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 she would have the same kind of response, right? And I'm just giving the example of who we have running for president right now. one guy can rally a crowd, the other woman is saying, hey, we're going to do this. Let's all get together and sing Kumbaya. I don't think the country's looking for Kumbaya. You might want to change your perspective in the last couple of days here.
Yeah.
You know? So that's my thought on it.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we met at the rally. And because I was a volunteer and I was also a participant in the parade of proof at the end there, we were all hanging out stage left while everybody was talking. And it was cool for me. I was starstruck. I was hanging out with all these doctors that I've idolized. And some of them I knew, some of them I got to say hi to. And I kept saying to my wife, that's Vinnie over there. You know, I want to go say hi to Vinnie. I want to thank him for being a part of my story. And she kept saying, well, go say hi. But you hadn't done your speech yet. And I really didn't want to disturb you. I didn't know if you were potentially brainstorming, or I just didn't want to mess up your flow. So I waited until you were done. And I came over and I said, hi. I said, it was a pleasure to meet you. And you said back to me that the pleasure was all yours. And it was just really nice for you to say that. And then I told you a little bit about myself, and I could tell that you were legitimately listening to me. And then you said that you were sorry for what I had to go through. And it was genuine and sincere. And in those moments, it did not feel like I was talking to one of my idols or a celebrity. Honestly, it felt like I was talking to a friend. And I literally felt like you're one of the nicest people I ever met. And I really appreciate you listening to me and being so nice and kind to a stranger like me.
Can you tell that to my wife? Can I bottle this? You never listen to me. It's like, well, look, it's always, worth it to me to talk. If someone's going to take the time to come up and want to shake my hand and tell me their story, I'm interested, right? We all have a story. And I think in today's world, we all feel like no one's listening to us. So look, I mean, I should have been dead twice. And if I can just go and meet people and hear their stories, and that makes me feel better. So you're doing me a favor. I remember the first time my wife came with me to a thing, like a low carb thing or whatever. And she was like, people just come up to you. And let's see, my phone is here. They come up to me and they do this. They go, and they're showing me a picture of themselves when they were like 600 pounds. And then I look at them. And sometimes I reach in and give them a hug so they don't see that I'm tearing up. Like, I get affected by that, right? It's like, yeah. My God, you were going to be dead in 5 minutes. And here you are looking like you can run a marathon. It's two different people. And that affects me emotionally. It's like, wow, man, look at what you did. And my wife said to me, she goes, why is everyone putting the phone in your face? I said, look at the pictures they're showing me. And you're going to be freaked out, right? And so I like it. I love when people come over and say hi and tell me their story. And it makes me realize that I'm not just yelling into a black hole, right?
Yeah, that's great. And so for your role in my story, I don't have that big transformation. I don't have a before and after picture. I lost 45 pounds through this process, but my before and after picture would be what my brain looked like before. And I don't have that on a poster. It would be my brain under attack and being eaten by aliens and on fire and drowning all at the same time. And my after is my brain sitting on a beach somewhere in a chair, catching the sun with a drink and an umbrella. That's my before and after. I heard you mention the carnivore diet like 6 years ago. You were on with Adam and Drew. I used to listen to them. I don't even know what show it was at this point. It's been so long. But you were talking about people eating only meat. And honestly, I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard. First of all, how could we survive on just meat? Because we need our vegetables and our fruits. But how could anybody even tolerate eating only meat? It just seems so boring, and it was just a crazy idea, but I'm a crazy guy, and that idea stuck with me. And as I was on my low carb path, I was eating less and less plants and more meat and feeling better and better. And hearing you talk about the carnivore diet always stuck with me. And within like 6 months, I was eating meat only. And here I am 5.5, 6 years later. I'm doing this thing called HFBO, which is high fat beef only. And it's completely shaped my life. And it's also helping other people as well.
Yeah, I the first time I came across people only eating meat, I don't know if it was sometime between, I'm going to give like a couple of years, like sometime between 1989 and 1991.
Wow.
I was, I've always been interested in these longevity groups, these people that are trying to live into triple figures, right? And not just make it to 100, but make it to 100 dancing and living like to one. Some of them think they're going to live to 120, 130. But back then there was enough information. There was no internet to go to. There's no World Wide Web. And, these people were just, learning from text, right? From what was there before. And there are a couple of different ways that people would approach it. Some people would approach it on a vegetable style or vegan or vegetarian diet, vegetarian probably being the safest of that group, because most vegetarians will eat dairy and eggs, meaning they'll get all the proper nutrients they need. They just won't eat animal fat. The problem with that is a lot of times they go pretty low fat. But there's you can read a lot of stuff where people are trying to make it past 100 eating a vegetarian style lifestyle, or some people are now calling it the Mediterranean style diet, which no one really knows what that means, right? It's just out there. But then I heard about these groups of people living the same way that the Maasai Indian tribe, not Indian, I'm sorry, African tribe lives. The Maasai is part of one of the countries in Africa. And I don't know if you've ever seen these people, but they
I have.
they sustain their life just on meat, hunted meat. And I think they graze animals too, but these guys are built naturally. Like if you go watch a bodybuilding competition where, like they have the board chart competition and these guys are on steroids and everything else to look a certain way, these men and women naturally look like that just walking around. There's no gym in their community, right? These people are living in, just mud huts and stucco with thatched roofs, and they live off the land, and they have the most beautiful bodies you've ever seen, and they live forever. And this eating just pretty much meat and fat from bacon and hogs and the whole thing really intrigued me back then, because I remember spending a lot of time in the early 80s studying the letter on corpulence, and of course that's what Atkins pulled from, and there was a few other things, Otto Warburg when I was going through college, and what he was talking about with cancer. And by the way, folks, everyone I'm talking about right now, the letter on corpulence was written in the 1800s. Otto Warburg was around in the 1920s and 30s. None of this information is brand new, right? They were curing cancer and seizures and everything else by eating high fat diets. And now you have these groups of people following the Maasai people who eat mainly meat and just some vegetation, naturally planted, just leaves and plants and whatever they eat. And I'm looking at all this going, well, there must be some truth to this, because these Maasai people look a hell of a lot better than any vegan or vegetarian I've ever seen, right? So that was the beginning clues, right? Just watching those people. Now, when I started, when I was working with my clients in Hollywood and keeping them lean by eating fat and protein and cutting out carbohydrates, no one ever talked about the mental aspect at all. no, just no one did. And God only knows, a lot of these actors and actresses, the reason they can be so good at their craft is because they're batshit crazy, right? There's something about art. We hear about, Vincent van Gogh chopping his own ear off and all this stuff. Artists are incredibly enlightened, and a lot of times they have mental problems, right? I don't know why those two go hand in hand, but no one ever mentioned to me, hey, I feel better because of my diet, right? It wasn't until I took to the internet and started proposing this way of eating where anecdotally people would say, hey, my wife finally got pregnant, or you're not going to believe this, but I feel better. Mentally, my doctors lowered my SSRIs or whatever. And I don't even understand that. And it wasn't until the aforementioned Georgia Ede came along and started talking to me and got a bug in my ear going, yeah, we're doing stuff up at Harvard where we're fixing people. And I was like, whoa, really? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, people tell me this, but it's all anecdotal. If someone says they finally got pregnant, I obviously don't go, well, eating low carb, high fat will help you get pregnant, right? My mind doesn't jump to that. My mind jumps to, well, you just finally got pregnant, right? When someone says, my doctor lowered my SSRIs or I'm off of them completely or whatever, those are all N1 experiments. And I just kind of go, yeah, okay, yeah. I'm glad you feel better, right? But when someone like Georgia Ede and then Mary Newport comes around and starts yapping in my ear and going, yeah, my husband had, dementia and we reversed a lot of it with coconut oil. Then you're sitting around going, wait a minute. I start triangulating. There's a famous doctor up at Harvard saying this. There's another MD saying this somewhere else. Could there be some truth here? Right? And that's when you start going, I need these women in my movies. I need to tell the world about these people. Right? What's your experience?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, I kind of found this whole thing by accident. I heard you talking about the carnivore thing. I initially went low carb to lose weight. I was almost 50 pounds overweight and I felt disgusting, but I was also irritable and angry. I've had bipolar my whole life. I've dealt with those kind of symptoms, but I lowered my carbs to lose weight. And by the time I was eating all meat, I discovered that eating lean meat's not going to work. So when I added in some fat, I started upping the fat, and then I just discovered ketosis by accident. I got into it by accident. I didn't even know what it was or what was happening. I just had a euphoric feeling, and I got this great sense of calm and happiness and gratitude. And then once I researched it and figured out what it was, I discovered that have been using the keto diet for epilepsy for a very long time. And now I've never had seizures, but the only medicines that have ever worked for me have been anti-seizure treatments. And that includes medical marijuana. I smoked pot for a very long time because it was the only thing that provided relief. So it made total sense that a diet that is also used to treat seizures would work for me. And that was probably 3-4 years ago. And I've been following down that path ever since. And it allows me to be a completely different person.
Are you still using pot to keep things at bay, or have you gone to less pot or no pot at all?
I don't need it. I don't want it. When I'm doing the diet right and I feel great, I don't need it. And the times that I have used it where I thought, recreationally, maybe for fun, I did not like how it made me feel, because the way I feel in deep ketosis is so far superior that I don't need it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. A buddy of mine who's exactly my age, we know each other from the gym, and he keeps himself very fit. He's as lean and as muscular as I am. And we compare notes all the time, right? And he's always, he eats more carbohydrates than I do because I basically don't eat any other than broccoli, and, which shows up on my plate, every second or third night. So I'll eat it because my wife made it, right? Like she steamed it up and put a little butter on it. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to have this. but he eats a lot more carbs than me. He's high protein, he's moderate fat, but he eats carbs. And he's always saying to me, you have way more energy than me. You come in the gym, you work out really hard. And then he goes, I see you outside, you're rocking around with, he's always saying, when he passes me in his car, he goes, I see you with that rucksack on. What's in it? And it's always between 30 and 50 pounds, depending on what I feel like. I throw it on when I do my walk. When I'm talking to clients, I go outside and walk. I throw a rucksack on, right? And he goes, you do that, and I know you go rowing, and you get on your indoor spinner and all this kind of stuff. He goes, how do you have the energy to do it all? It's like, man, when you got clean burning energy all day long, at 62, I feel like a teenager. I look, I know I'm a hammer that's looking for nails right now in this conversation, but I've always used this example. Everyone has lit a fire in their life, either a campfire or right now my fireplace is going because it's 38 degrees outside, right? When I start my fire, you need something to get the fire started, right? You need something that ignites really fast. So I'll put a piece of fat wood or two in there and put really thin pieces of kindling that just flames up really fast onto the fat wood. And then I'll throw a thicker piece of wood on that. Think of the thicker piece of wood as being fat, right? The thin wood, sometimes if there's some cardboard upstairs, I'll throw a little cardboard, something to just flame up really fast. It burns really fast, it burns really hot, and then it goes down to nothing, right? But that big log is the fat. And then when I put a second big log in there, now I have two big chunks of fat. I don't have to look at it for hours. It will just burn at a level. As long as I keep the flue in that fireplace at a certain level, I can get that wood to just sip along for hours, right? That's clean burning fat versus the little chips of wood you put in, which I call the carbohydrates. They burn hot, they burn fast, and they burn out in seconds. Mm-hmm. And that's my buddy at the gym versus me leaving the gym, maybe taking a scoop of coconut oil and then throwing a rucksack on or hopping on a bike or whatever. He can't do it, right?
That's a great analogy, and I love it because if you see my logos, like my whole thing is all about fire. I've got fire tattoos, and it represents the passion for life that burns inside of me. So I really love that analogy, but it makes a lot of sense. Now, where are you at with your friend? Is he NSNG? Can you get him to change his diet? What's going on there?
No, he's not going to change his diet. We've talked about it. I go over to his house. He's a cigar smoker, and he's got this beautiful cigar room. And I love the way cigars smell. It reminds me of my grandfather. And I go over and I pretend drink with him because I can't really drink anymore. So I'll pour my own scotch and really nurse it. He knows what I'm doing because I bring this along to his house too, this 40-ounce canister. And over the course of 1 ounce of scotch, I drink 40 ounces of water. So he knows what's going on, right? He knows I'm just there for the conversation. And we've had long conversations about, he was like, yeah, I just can't. He goes, it's not worth it for me. He goes, I'm lean. I feel healthy. He doesn't, he does eat a lot of protein. He does eat moderate fat. And most of his carbohydrates, well, he eats rice. It comes from that. And I think there's some pasta in his life. But he loves dessert. And he was heavy. He told me before I met him, he lost like 40-something pounds just by going to the gym and cutting back on having desserts every day, right? So metabolically, he's very healthy. He never got really fat. He was like you. He had about 40 pounds to lose. And I've met you. I can tell you he's taller than you. He's maybe 6'1". You look like you were like 5'9" or 5'10". I remember right.
No, me, I'm about 5'7".
Yeah, I have trouble figuring out heights, but
Yeah.
he's way taller. But he had about, he showed me pictures of when, he was heavier, right? And so he looks great. The guy looks great. He's very lean, very fit. Whenever he goes to the doctor, his metabolic, all of his markers are great. He doesn't have any fatty liver disease. So he could get away with having dessert 3-4 nights a week. Truth be known, Stephen, I could. But I just like to, I don't want to drive myself out of ketosis because I don't know if we mentioned this as part of my thing at the top of the show, but I'm a leukemia survivor, and I've survived it twice now. And they told me I would be going on chemo every 5 years. You know the story.
Yes.
And I went 17 years between leukemia bouts, right? So do I think keto is helping me living in ketosis? Absolutely. I beat every metric that any doctor came up with times 3, right? So it's worth it for me to not have the cake or the pie or the whatever. It's just worth it, right? And that's part of the reason why when I do have a scotch, which is very rare, I'm not really drinking, right? If you dilute 1 ounce of scotch with 40 ounces of water, I'm just sitting there with a glass with, something in it. It's not really affecting me at all.
I feel bad for your friend because he's never going to get to feel what it's like to have all that extra energy. But not everybody wants to give up their desserts. That's a struggle that a lot of people have. I have friends and family, and they see what I'm doing, they see what other people are doing, but they just they can't put the dessert down.
Look, yeah, I get it. I'm a sugarholic. That's the other reason. People go, "Do you never have dessert?" Yeah, 2 or 3 times a year, 4 times a year. And you'll go, "Wait, how do you know that?" It's like, well, someone makes a cake on my birthday, and I'm a sugarholic. I'm going to enjoy a piece of that cake, right? But then I have to struggle. I drink coffee. I do everything I can to get the taste out of my mouth, get the feeling out. I'll even go brush my teeth right after, just to get it gone, right? Because if not, I'm like, I need another piece of cake. And I'll follow up by eating coconut oil and really high-fat yogurt or something right behind it, even though I'm not hungry, just to get that high-low feeling out of my body. So I have ways around it. The other time is when I go to Europe. My wife is from England. And when I go there at Christmas time, they would look at me as if I had 2 heads, like I'm the Medusa or something, because they make these incredible desserts and pies and all this kind of stuff. And at Christmas dinner, if I'm sitting there going, "Oh no, I'm good," I'm just not going to do that, right? I don't want my in-laws to think that Serena married a nut job. And I'm not doing it just for them. I'm perfectly honest. I'm enjoying it too. And that's usually when I enjoy wine because I'm already out of ketosis. I always say it's like, okay, I just jumped into a swimming pool with a tuxedo on. It doesn't matter if it starts raining, the tuxedo's already wet, right? So my sister-in-law has really good wine. So if I'm going to drink wine, it's going to be in France or in England, depending on which one of her houses I go to. And there's going to be really good wine, right? That's when I'm going to splurge on that. And people go, "How do you come out of that?" I just wake up the next morning and that's it. I drink a cup of coffee. I have my coconut oil. I do not count on them having coconut oil at their house. I carry it with me, right? I use a high fat to get away from what the problem is, right? That day for lunch or breakfast, it's England. Guess what? They always have bacon, that really fatty bacon. I'll even wake up and go, "Hey guys, I'm going to make the bacon Cajun style." Like, I'm making that up. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can eat a lot of bacon while I'm making the bacon. Like no one's looking, and pop another piece of mouth. As long as I could get right back on heavy fats right away, I could get that carb thing gone. Right? So there's ways to do it. You just have to be a little sneaky about it, without looking like a lunatic.
I love that you said you're fixing yourself with fat, because that's the tagline to my show, which we're going to get to at the end. It's fix yourself with fat. Now, I'm doing it for my mental health. You're doing it for your sugar addiction. I'm also a sugar addict. But
Yeah.
where you and I differ is, so you're saying is put a little life into living, and that's how you're doing it. You're enjoying your couple times a year where you're able to consume
Yeah.
those items. If I do that, I will suffer for it. And unfortunately for me, my most prominent symptoms are irritability and anger, and I've got my 8-year-old, and the whole reason I'm doing this is so I can be a competent dad. So if I'm going to have a piece of cake on my birthday and then for the next 48 hours I'm snapping at her, well, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
Oh,
So
that's a totally different thing. And I
yeah,
agree with you. Yeah. You see, I don't get angry, not that I know of. My wife says I'm angry all the time, but that's just her. She's wrong. Yeah, if I had that going on, I would never I would avoid it as if it's a rattlesnake.
that's what I do.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch it at all. And I've gone whole years, kind of, just as a solidarity thing to remember, because I'm working with people like you all the time, right? And I call it no life into living years. And what I've done every time, I've probably done it 5 or 6 or 7 times now. What I'll do is on the 31st, I never celebrate New Year's Eve. Like my wife and I, we're in bed by 10 o'clock. It's like, what really do I need to like sit there and count down from 10? So I'll do the thing where on New Year's Eve, we usually have like a rib roast or something really cool, something
Nice.
more expensive than we would normally ever eat. And we usually invite friends over. And if I know I'm going to go the next 12 months without eating any sugar or anything, I'll have like, I'll order in a red velvet cake.
Mm.
Is that what it's called? Yeah, the red velvet. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll have a big chunk of that, like a big piece. And then the next morning I'll wake up and it's not even a thought. It's like, I'm going the next 12 months. And it's not like, oh, except for your birthday. Oh, it's except when you go to Kristen's house in France or whatever. It's 12 months of no life into living, because I want to see how you feel, right? The people like you. I want to remember. I want to be in solidarity with you guys because it helps me coach better. It's like, oh yeah, I know what they're going through because I was down in Louisiana for Mardi Gras and everybody was eating king cake and there was beignets and I couldn't have it, right? I had to make that choice. I had to work around the beignets or the fried catfish or whatever that treat would have been, right? I'm sitting with my friend with his cigar room, right? And he's having a scotch. I'm just having the water now, right? So yeah, I've done those years and I might do one of those years next year. It's kind of cool because people go, well, why would you put yourself in that kind of torture if you don't have to? Sometimes we need to feel, what other people are feeling if you really want to help them. And I'm not better than anyone else in that respect. I need to remember from time to time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does make sense. And even though I'm not one of your coaching clients, if I were, I would be blown away by that sentiment, because how many people are going to want to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and make sacrifices like that? But it makes a lot of sense, and it points to your character and the fact that I was saying I felt like you were one of the nicest people I ever met. And I want to talk quickly about how I got you on the show. We were at the rally, we had already spoken, and people kept coming up to you and introducing themselves, saying hi. So you were busy. But then at some point I noticed you were only like 10 feet from me and there was nobody around. So I walk over, I'm like, hey, I got this podcast. Now, this is one of the differences for me when I'm not in ketosis. I wouldn't even be at the rally, let alone walk up to you and ask you to be on my show. But I'm a different person in ketosis. So I walk over, I got this small podcast and I start asking, how big do I have to get for you to come on? And I was about to say, what do I need? Like 100,000 followers. And you cut me right off. And you said, No, I'll do it right now. I will come on your show right now. And I was totally blown away with that. And I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Look, I started podcasting one day. It was back when no one knew what podcasts were, right? And I think that's the only reason my show grew to what it grew to so fast was because there was, it was the only fitness podcast out there. And it was in the early days of podcasting when no one really knew what it was. I mean, I think we've done close to 2,600 shows now.
Wow.
So I'm never going to tell anyone. People always, like you, they go, what do I have to do to get you on? Is like, I don't know, email me. And I tell everyone the same thing, you know, um, email me and don't think the word kids use is ghosting. Don't think I'm big timing you or anything. If I don't email you back, email me again because my inbox gets, even though it's a private inbox, it gets inundated with people figuring out what my email address is and writing to me. And I think that actually happened to you. I said, look, if I don't write back to you right away, I'm going to write back to you. And I think you told me
Right.
before the show, it's like, yeah, you took a week to get back to me. And I was like, I felt horrible when you told me that because I didn't realize it was a week. I think I saw it and went, oh, I need to get back to Steve. And I told him I would be on this podcast. You were sitting there going, I think this guy forgot about me. And it's like, no, it's just I didn't get to you until I got to you, That's why I tell everyone, if I don't write to you, write back again. You're not bothering me. I just need to see it,
Yeah, that's exactly what you told me at the rally. And that's what I did. Because initially I wrote you and I tried to pick out a day. And then within 24 hours, I followed up. But I knew you were coming on. It was just trying to nail down the appointment and when it was going to take place. And I was
Yeah.
patient. Before we get more into your story and learn about your journey to creating the NSNG, I want to talk about a few things that are near and dear to both of our hearts. And the first one is exercise. As I was prepping for this, I was consuming more of your content than usual. And I heard you talking about when you were powerlifting in college football and that your bench was 400, your squat was 550. You didn't mention your deadlift. You said you could deadlift whatever you throw on the bar. So my first question is, how tall are you? And do you know how much you weighed during those days when you were pulling those numbers?
Yeah, I do know. I can't remember the most I've ever deadlifted, but there was always, on the heavier sets, at least 4 plates on there, which is 405 on the heavy
Yes.
set, So on the lighter sets, you had, 315, which is 3 plates. And that was back in the days when weights would clank because we didn't have the fancy rubber bumper plates and all that. When I was in college, I weighed anywhere from like 215 to 230. So in the off season, I would kind of walk around at 225. I'm 6 feet tall. I used to be 6 feet tall. I'm like 5'11 now. I've lost an inch. My waist was exactly the same size it is now. So if, ironically, you put a picture of me up at 6, it's like, this is 60. And that's what my waist looked like when I also weighed 225.
Wow.
And to answer your audience's question, I've never taken juice. That's what we call steroids back in the day. And now they call it gear. They just keep changing the name of drugs. I was always natty, as the kids say that they are natural. And yeah, it was just a full commitment to powerlifting all the time. And the way I trained was kind of, if you ever watch West Side Barbell versus the World, Louis Simmons, that's how I worked out. It wasn't like bodybuilding workouts. It was all about, getting stronger and stronger and stronger because I wasn't that big. I was very fast as an athlete. So I had to figure out how to keep size on, and just doing, compound movements was how I did it. It turns out when I did compound movements, I ended up looking like a bodybuilder, right? My body, I'm a genetically gifted guy. It came from my parents who were both teachers. They were, bookworms and nerds. And 2 of their kids, me and my younger brother, the genetics came from peasant stock, I guess. And but yeah, easily 550, maybe even 575 at some point. I was a heavy squatter. That's like legit squats.
Oh yeah.
Right? And the way we did them back then, we didn't have like the rack I have behind me here in my office. It wasn't like that. It was like a step down rack.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you got stuck at the bottom, you just laid it in that rack and crawled out, right? So that's the way, so we were able to go really heavy. Sometimes it would crush us. The deadlifts, God only knows where I was able to. If I had like 425 on there, you're doing sets of 3 and 4, so God only knows where I was able to do once. Bench press, 4 plates, that's 405.
Wow.
I don't, but that was years and years and years of just being dedicated to the gym.
Yeah.
Right? Just crazy amount of work to get there.
Those are very, very impressive numbers for people who don't know powerlifting. Those are extremely impressive numbers, especially for the size that you were. I was heavy.
Look, let me just say that those numbers don't win any competitions.
No, but they're just for a college football player. They are very, very impressive.
Yeah, I was committed to the gym because, at the time, offensive linemen weighed 275. They were all 6'4", 6'5", 275. Now these guys go 6'8", 320, and
they're monsters.
4'8", 40s and stuff. But I mean, when a guy is coming out at you like a hippopotamus getting ready to charge you, and you had to make sure your head didn't get lopped off by these guys, man. They were just brutal. So the gym was very important for a guy like me.
The gym was very important. It's a big part of my life because it's one of the few things that provided me some relief when I was suffering. And I said I'm about 5'7". At my strongest, I was 165 pounds, and my best bench was 240. Bench was not a big lift for me. It took a long time to get up there.
Yeah.
My deadlift was what I was most dedicated to, and I was coming for 4 plates. I was close. I got up to 395. I was at a body weight of 165. So that's almost 2.5 times body weight, which, like you said, is not going to win any competitions. But
actually, that could win a competition at your height and weight.
Maybe. It's legitimate strong.
Yeah.
I did the Jim Wendler 531 for many, many years. That was the base of my lifting.
Yeah.
And it was near and dear to me. And then I pulled the 395, and then my daughter was born. And then, having a newborn, I couldn't work out like I wanted to. And then 2 months later, I fell off a ladder. I dislocated my hand. And it was bad. I shattered my wrist. They were talking about fusing my hand to my arm so that it would no longer move. Like, it's good now, but had to plate and screws in. And then that didn't work out. They had to take that out. So it was 2 years that I couldn't lift. That was what preceded all the extra weight gain and then lowering my carbs. And then I recovered and I started to deadlift again. I got myself back up to like 300, but it didn't feel the same. It hurt. It hurt my wrist. It hurt my back. And so I gave it up. But it was a big passion of mine for a very long time.
Yeah, those are impressive numbers, Stephen, by any stretch of the imagination, and even more impressive by 165. I mean, that's incredible. Where are you in the world? Where do you live?
I'm in New Jersey.
Is it cold there today?
Yeah, it was cold. I went for a walk this morning and it was low 30s, cold as it's been all year.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I woke up to 32 this morning and
it was 33 here. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the wacky things I do is barefoot walking. I've been barefoot for a couple of years now, and I like to get up in the morning and start my day with a walk around the neighborhood. And it was cold this morning. By the time I got back, I couldn't feel my feet at all on that cold pavement.
I could not do that, man. The cold walking, with the barefoot, no way.
I'm trying it. I'm going to see if I can make it through the winter without putting shoes on in the morning. We'll see.
Well, you're going to get ice there at some point.
We'll see. I can say this. It makes me happy, and it's a great way to start my day.
Yeah.
When I have time, I drive about 10 minutes and I go to the bay and I watch the sunrise, and there's a paved path in the park, and I do the walk, and then I do a whole mobility routine, and then I sit and meditate and watch the sun come up. And these are all things that just really make me happy and start my day well.
That's so cool, man. That's really good.
That's why I do it. All right. So another thing that is near and dear to both of our hearts is an interest in helping children. So I heard a story recently about how you got to LA and it was that you were interested in helping children. It really struck me because even though mental health is my focus, because that's what I'm recovering from, I want to help as many people as possible. And I want to reduce their suffering or even avoid suffering altogether if possible. And so my biggest target is children because they're not, most of them are not really suffering yet. If you can get them when they're young, you can prevent their suffering. And, I got an 8-year-old and she's got her own issues she deals with. We do a keto diet for her. She deals with ADHD and OCD. And her peers, a lot of them are not as bad as her, but they're not well either. Our children are really suffering and our diets are just trash for them. So my interest really would be to help children learn as much about metabolic health as possible to help them avoid suffering. So I was wondering for you if you could share with us a story about how you got to LA.
Yeah, I got to college in 1981, and out of just interest in the human body and whatever. I was at Tulane, which is it's a medical school, so everything at Tulane is either pre-law or pre-med, and then they have the medical school. So I started taking a lot of classes, and long story short, I became an exercise physiologist because I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to go to med school, and this was available. This degree, and I finished at the top of my class. I finished number one in my class, and I finished last in my class because I was in a class by myself. No one else had that degree. So, right before I was graduating, they said, "Look, you're about to get a degree in something where there's literally no jobs." When I was a junior, a counselor came because I was on a dean's list. I'm going to brag. I was on a dean's list every semester, and they're like, "You're a really smart dude. Would you like to go to medical school? We know you don't have money to get in, but you have the grades to get in." I was like, "Nah, I don't want to be a doctor." And they were like, "Well, would you like to be an attorney? We can take the LSAT. You could be an attorney." They were almost upset that I had these incredible grades and I didn't care to be what people just strive to be, right? It's like, no, I'm good. I think, this. What are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. I was thinking about, maybe my dad has a small tow truck service. Maybe I was thinking about taking that over. They literally thought I was being funny, but I looked at work as being like, you go get a job. My brother was a mechanic and a welder, right? He never went to college. To me, that's what jobs looked like. I couldn't imagine being in an office, right? And my parents were both school teachers their entire life. My dad started the tow truck service on the side. And they were like, well, you better get a teaching degree because if all else fails, you can go teach, right? As a fallback. So I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I looked in to getting a secondary education degree while I was still in school. And I almost didn't have to do anything to get there, right? It was like a couple of classes. I had to take a reading this class and a history that one, another history class, like a couple of like really easy classes. And I had to do student teaching for like a semester, right? And on top of that, since I was getting a degree in exercise physiology, I said, is it possible in my secondary education to be considered a PE teacher? The one teacher no one wants to be, right? It's the bane of every joke. What do you do if you can't? What do you do if you can't do anything? You teach. Or what if you can't teach? Well, you teach PE, right? That's always the joke. But I wanted to be a PE. I wanted to have that as my degree. So they said, we have a problem. You've never taken a PE class since you've been in college. And I said, well, how many PE classes will I have to take to then sign on? And they made me take some kind of remedial health class, which I thought was complete BS. It was a complete waste of time. It was only one credit. And they made me take 2 PE classes of anything I wanted to take. And those were both 1 credit, right? So it's like, I got to go spend all this time doing like nothing so you guys can say I'm a PE teacher. And I was like, that's right. And I was already the assistant strength coach. They were paying me as a student teacher at the university at Tulane to teach weightlifting. I said, could that be one of them? And they said, no. I said, I'm teaching a PE class. We can't call that it's like, nope, you're teaching it. You got to take. So I went down the list. I saw scuba diving on the list and I went, ooh, wait a minute. I'm going to take that. They supply all the equipment and everything. I can't afford this. I'm broke, right? They're supplying tanks and regulators and everything. I was like, sign me up. And they also had archery. So my 2 PE classes was scuba and archery. And I did scuba for years after that, but I'm 62 years old. I still do archery. I have like some really nice bows and all kinds of stuff. You know, I shoot in the backyard. And so that I got a PE degree. And then I got a job just teaching strength training at Newman School. And Newman School is in New Orleans. It's where the Manning kids, went. Most recently, Arch Manning, Cooper's son. And Cooper was one of my students when I was teaching. And a great kid. All the Manning kids were great. I'm bragging because their father is a friend of mine, Archie Manning. I got to know these people. But that's the school I taught weightlifting in. And I noticed that between the time I graduated high school, which was 1981, the spring of 81, now it's 1985, and I'm teaching high school kids, and they looked different. Now, the Manning kids looked like athletes, and a lot of the athletes, the basketball players, but I noticed that some of the kids were gaining weight, right? My school, growing up, we had one fat dude. His name was Phil Callahan. I know that because he was my best friend. And he was the fat kid. He weighed about 200 pounds. He was about 6 feet, maybe 205, with no musculature. So he had a bit of a gut, right? This was common now at a very expensive private school in New Orleans, right? And I'm like going, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then I was there for like 5 years. I left there in 1990, and I noticed every year it seemed to be getting worse, right? Kids getting fatter and fatter. So what happened in that 10 years where I can physically see it? I didn't have to measure them in any other way other than seeing the kids in that school. And that's when I started with we need to do something. There's a problem here. And that was my impetus. I was trying to do it in New Orleans. I had a radio show at the time called Talking Fitness, and no one wanted to hear it, right? It was a popular show, but no one wanted to hear, children have a weight problem.
Right.
So I packed up my car and moved to LA. I had to move to the epicenter of where this stuff was going on. And that was the beginning of me doing any of it.
That's cool. I never heard you tell that whole story like that with such detail. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an interesting time. And the end of the story is when I got to LA and got meetings. You probably heard this part of the story before, but your audience hasn't. I got to LA and I had meetings with like Disney, and Nickelodeon was a brand new thing back then. You got to remember, this was before the Menendez brothers were convicted of murder. That's how long ago this was. And they've been in jail for like 35 years now. And, they, no one wanted to hear this. Like, we love these program ideas. It's like, we got to get kids off of all of this juice and Coke and fruit roll-ups I see on your channel. And I see cereal, and they're like, it's not going to happen. They would just kick me out of the meetings. That was my beginning, being told no every day.
Yeah. You're going right into their pockets. That's why. That's where all their money's coming from.
Yeah. No one wanted to hear it.
I would love to talk about your childhood a little bit, some of your early life. I know you're one of 4 boys, which is just like me. I was number 3 in line. Where were you in the lineup?
I was number 2, so I have second child syndrome. I'm like Jan in the Brady Bunch. Everything was Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. My older brother got all the attention.
I'm curious a little bit about your upbringing and most curious about how your family approached food when you were growing up.
Italian family on both sides, the grandparents, living in the house to some degree, are living right next door. Everything we ate, we didn't have a lot of money. With 4 boys, you don't go out and eat a whole lot.
Mm.
Everything is cooked at home by a grandmother or a great grandmother. My mom had to work, and my mom did a lot of cooking too. But everything was wholesome. I was having this conversation the other day with a buddy of mine. He was like, which breakfast cereals did you guys have around when you were a kid? And it's like, we didn't. As a matter of fact, my mom would bring like something like cornflakes or frosted flakes or Cheerios home once in a while. And she would literally say to us, I'm going to let you guys have this because you've been begging for it. But if you say this to anyone outside of this house, it'll never come here again. Right? Because my grandmother or great grandmother from the old country, that would have been like, that's child abuse. What are you doing? Right? When I told my buddy every day started with bacon, eggs, toast with butter, and grits on the side, he was like, wait, who was cooking all that? It's like my grandmother's house was like a short order kitchen, and my mom did the same thing. My mom, because she worked and she had to leave early, she did all the meals on a weekend, but we just went next door to my grandmother's house. Like literally, it was 15 steps away from our door. It's like the show Everybody Loves Raymond. You would walk out of one house into the next house. And it was a short order kitchen. I don't know what time my grandmother woke up, but by the time we got there, it was all there every single day. And my friend said, wait, so you're telling me you had bacon and eggs every day? Yep. Coffee with cream as a kid, all of it. It was all there. I can still smell it today. Right? Eggs made to order, by the way. But she knew I wanted, a couple over easy. She knew Michael wanted them scrambled because he would make an egg sandwich with his. She knew exactly. So everything we ate was just whole foods. Notice there was some grains in there, but it wasn't the major part of the meal. It was all about the bacon and the eggs.
That's amazing. You're very lucky to have that.
I didn't realize it. I thought every family in the world had that going on. When I talk to people now, they go, yeah, I had cereal and milk or something called, do you know what an Eggo is? I've never had an Eggo.
Yeah, I do, unfortunately.
Some kids, I did it on the podcast because we were talking on a podcast with my co-host, Anna Vocino. And I said, yeah, I've never had, it might've been Gina Grad. I have 2 different co-hosts. And it's like, yeah, I've never had a Pop-Tart. And they were like, what do you mean you've never had a Pop-Tart? When you were a kid, your mom didn't buy Pop-Tarts. It's like, I'm pretty sure I never had a Pop-Tart in my life. So we actually got, we always would call my mom on the show and just without any prep, Ma, did you ever buy a Pop-Tart when I was a kid? And she was like, no. Ma, do you think I've ever eaten a Pop-Tart? Not that I know of. It wasn't until I tried a Pop-Tart on the show that and I couldn't believe how horrible it was. Like the roof of my mouth felt like someone coated it in like an oil slick or something. I don't even know what that feeling was, but it didn't even taste, it tasted like a chemical to me. Right. And I only took one bite. I couldn't stand to take a second bite.
Do you know what flavor it was? Do you remember?
It was red. It was either cherry or strawberry, but
okay.
And it had a frosting. And I said the frosting looks like frosted sugar, but I ended up, I told Gina or Anna, this doesn't taste like sugar. I actually peeled it off and separated the pocket knife that sits on my desk. I pried it off because I wanted to taste that by itself. It did not taste of sugar. The sugar was whatever the jelly stuff was inside.
Yeah.
And I cooked it properly. You know, we don't have a toaster that's out at my house, but we have a toaster put away because when guests come over, we don't say, hey, we live like this and you can't have a piece of toast. So when we have guests all the time, we pull the toaster. I had to go searching for the toaster just to make this thing. That sounds funny. I know people are going, who is this crackpot? But I never had a Pop-Tart.
You're better off for it. You're better off for it. I would argue that it's not food. It's a food-like substance. And this is what we're feeding our children for breakfast.
I couldn't imagine sending a kid to school with that. And by the way, my stepdaughter, who I'm very proud to say is in a big, giant New York firm doing mergers and acquisitions. She finished top in her class at UVA Law School and got hired by the biggest firm in the world. She ate a proper breakfast like that every morning. Her mom, like I said, is European. That's the way Serena grew up. Therefore, that's the way Tallulah grew up. And, you know, every day before she left for school, there was bacon and eggs. You know, if that doesn't form the brain, I don't know what, you can't make a genius out of anyone. She was very smart, right? She took after her mother and her father, who her father is a Mensa, you know, dude, you know, his IQ is a gazillion. Her IQ is a gazillion. But you can't take that kind of brain and fill it up on Pop-Tarts. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's one of the reasons I'm very fortunate to have found this diet for myself with a young kid. She's 8 years old now. And we started low carb for her when she was younger. We've been doing the ketogenic diet a little over a year now for her conditions, which is really, really helping her. But even when she was a baby, she was eating meat off the bone, and she's never had fruit juice. And there's a whole lot of, she's never had a Pop-Tart, and there's a whole lot of things out there that she has never had before because I know better now. I'm very fortunate for that.
Yeah. Good for her. Good for her.
She may not always feel that way, but I'm hoping when she gets older, she'll be more grateful for it. It's tough, man. She tells me what her peers are eating, and you know, it's breakfast, and it's the typical, they're eating Oreos and crackers and cookies, and it's just an abomination. It's terrible what these kids are eating.
You know, I'm going to admit something. I think I've talked about it on the podcast. When Tallulah's little girlfriends would come over, girls don't want to be different, right? They want to be like their friends. Mm-hmm. We would go out and buy Smuckers and bread and Jif peanut butter, because the only peanut butter we had was like peanuts that are crushed up for Tallulah so that she can. But she said, "Ma, none of my friends want to come over because we don't have regular food." We would literally buy that for when her friends would come over, because we didn't want our daughter to suffer, you know, any kind of social thing. And if that makes me a bad parent, you know, or a good parent, I'm not really sure, but we actually did that. And Tallulah would eat the Smuckers because Smuckers was basically just sugar. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it was high fructose corn syrup in there, high fructose corn syrup and whatever, but we would keep it hanging around for the kids. It was in the fridge. And by the way, Jif never goes bad or anything. Just leave it in the fridge. When we ran out, we'd buy another one. Kind of thing.
That's a good perspective on it, you know. So we do the best we can for Samantha. She's got a constant barrage of parties at school. It's Halloween time now. She's gonna have a Halloween party, and there's always birthdays, and so we send her over treats. We do the best we can to try to keep them healthy for her. And she's got a classmate who's eating popcorn every day, and she really loves popcorn. And now she knows that I want us to avoid grains as much as possible, but I'm not dogmatic about it. And at least the popcorn we have is not also fried in a seed oil. I forget if it's coconut oil or avocado oil. And so every once in a while she'll be like, hey, if I do such and such, she wants to make a deal with me. If I go to bed by 9:00 tonight, can I have popcorn tomorrow? I'm like, sure. And then she'll say, because she's like me, she'll eat beef fat. She'll be like, well, I'll eat beef fat tomorrow. I'll eat extra beef fat if you let me have popcorn. I'm like, okay, then. And she goes to bed thinking about it, and she wakes up thinking about it, and she's so proud of herself, and she can show all of her friends, like, hey, look, I got a bag of popcorn too. So we do the best we can to help her fit in.
No, and you have to. You don't want your kid to be the odd kid out, right? And yeah, we would do a lot of that. I would take. There was a place called Menchie's Yogurt. It's like soft serve yogurt in California, and Tallulah and her friend Emma. She had two friends named Emma. So we called one of them Menchie's. Like when she talked about Emma, it's like, which one? She goes, Menchie's Emma, because we would take her and Emma. They both loved going to Menchie's together, right, to get the yogurt. And, we didn't deny her that. It's like I was driving the kid to go get sugar, right? But you can't, how do you not do that, right? You don't want your kid. And look, she grew up learning and doing the right thing 90% of the time. And guess what? As an adult, she's eating the way we ate at home. She hasn't been in our home since she was 18. She's 28 now, or 29. Wow, I can't believe that. What the hell happened?
Right.
Hug them while you can, dude, because like they become like adults in 5 minutes.
I keep hearing that.
And she eats correctly now. When she comes and visits and the whole thing, we see what she orders in a restaurant, right? And Serena, we go up to her apartment in New York. We see what's in the fridge, right? So she's doing all the right things naturally. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we know what your food was like when you were growing up. So I'm wondering, let's see, I have a bunch of questions here. How did you get into your interests and hobbies of health and fitness? Did you have other things you were into that weren't exercise and fitness?
Yeah, well, there's two questions there. So the first question is, I wrote about it in Fitness Confidential. I was a nerdy kid. I was getting beat up a lot. And I found Jack LaLanne on television one afternoon. And, I was very young. I was like 9 or something, like really, really young. And I was like, I knew that Superman wasn't real and that kind of thing, but Jack LaLanne was real. He's a real man with real muscles, and he was lifting heavy things. So I made a makeshift gym and started working out, and that led to me going to this family friend. I always mention his name, Joe Bonadonna, this Italian guy. And he started me lifting weights at a very young age. And he, then I stopped getting beat up pretty quickly. So that worked. But hobbies, I was an outdoorsman without knowing I was an outdoorsman. I had a shotgun as a kid. I love, folks, if you're going, wait a minute, your parents gave you, I lived way out in the country. And yes, that's what kids had, shotguns when they were 11 and 12, right? And I would go hunting with my grandfather and my grandfather's friends. My dad didn't like hunting. My dad was an academic type. He never liked hunting or whatever. But I liked going hunting and fishing. And then I started taking my gun out almost every afternoon after school during hunting season and do a walkabout hunt. If I saw a rabbit, I would shoot the rabbit. If I saw a bird that was an edible bird, I would shoot the bird. And I would come home with a bag full of birds and rabbits. I didn't shoot squirrels because I hated the way squirrels tasted, right? You learn that by shooting a couple of squirrels and they don't taste good, right? So
what do they taste like?
They're more gamey. I don't know. They don't taste like, they're not tender and delicious like rabbit. And I know people, a lot of Cajun dishes down there. I grew up in Cajun country. People shoot squirrels and eat squirrels, and it was just never a thing for me. And I love the gamey taste. It was just, I don't know. Squirrels are basically rats with a good PR agent. So I figured out, I remember young, going out sometimes like 12 years old, and I would shoot a rabbit or two, and then I would stop, even though I saw way more rabbits that I could have shot. I would stop shooting them because if I shot 5 rabbits, I would have to come home and gut and clean 5 rabbits. But 2 rabbits is like, okay, I'll just do 2 rabbits And then that's less work I have to do when I get home. And then I started going out, doing my walkabout hunts. And I wouldn't shoot anything, even though I saw a lot of things I could shoot. And I quickly learned I liked hunting, but when it was a proper hunt, right? When you were going out with the beagles and everything and doing a rabbit hunt on the weekends with the adults and everything else, and it was a proper hunt. I like deer hunting like that too, versus what's called still hunting, where you just go track and shoot. I noticed that I wasn't shooting anything on my hunts by myself. I realized I just like being out in nature, right? And I think, that was like a calming thing for me. It's like walking around, just being out there. And most of the time my shotgun, when you crack a shotgun, you open it. I don't know if you know much about guns. I would just crack it and it would just be on my shoulder. And when that shoulder got tired, I put it on the other shoulder and I would just walk and walk and walk and walk and just be at peace with being out there. And then other times I would bring home, 2 or 3 rabbits, whatever I felt like cleaning. So that was my hobbies, just the outdoors. My brother was mechanically minded. We figured out, we found an old go-kart frame. When we were kids, my dad knew how to do some basic welding. He taught my brother and I how to, do an arc weld to fix things. We were real crappy at it. My brother's like a really good welder now, like beautiful welds. He's just an amazing guy. But we would build go-karts, from just scraps of go-karts. Used to be more of a thing when I was a kid. Like these frames were everywhere and they were rusted out and everything. And then we would find a side shaft, Tecumseh or Briggs and Stratton motor that didn't run, and take it and, free up the piston. Usually it was frozen in there. And my brother became a certified mechanic. I learned how to do it. It was kind of neat. I like playing with mechanical things. But that was another hobby. So I had hobbies that people do as adults, right? Hunting, working on small engines with my brother. And it was always fun to see him fire up and actually do something. And a lot of that came with the help of my dad teaching us how to set the low carburetor needles and all that kind of thing. So the hobbies were kind of, your parents might get sent to jail for letting kids play with motors and handing an 11-year-old shotgun and saying, just be careful, But that's what I was doing.
That's cool. I can relate to the outdoors part of it because I've always been a very outdoors kind of person, and it does give me a sense of calm and happiness. And I spend as much time as I can outdoors. Started working from home when COVID hit, which has been a blessing because I can take a break. I can take my lunch break, and I have a lake that's a 5-minute walk. I can walk to the lake and I can walk up and down on the sand. And a lot of my favorite activities involve the outdoors, like kayaking. I do a lot of walking. I do walk with a weight vest at times too. I'm very fortunate where I live that I have the bay nearby. I can go there and catch the sunrise, and then the lake is so close I can catch the sunset there. I do love being outdoors. I grew up in the woods. I grew up playing manhunt and riding my bike in the woods, and it's always been a big part of my life.
Yeah, that the hunting as a kid is what really got me into, going off to Colorado and hiking 13ers and 14ers, and that led, to glaciers. So you never know where it's going to take you. One moment you're walking around along the bayou and the swamps of Louisiana, and the next thing you know, you find yourself at the top of Mont Blanc, right? And they're connected, right? They're a lifetime apart, but they're connected. One, the love of being outdoors and realizing it wasn't just about bringing meat home in a hunting sack, but it was, just loving being out there. And I just set up a situation. We have this patio in my house, and I went most of my life without owning a television, but now we have televisions, and I like watching pro football. I don't watch 2 days worth of football because you would waste 2 days, but if I watch a game or two, I'll be on my spinner down here. And then if I'm watching a game and I'm done spinning, I don't like to be stuck in the house, right? So I have this beautiful patio screened in, but it gets god awful cold up there. So, I bought those propane heaters. I had a guy put a television out there, so it can be snowing outside and I can still be outdoors, right? I'm not closed in by walls, right? I can be out there watching a game with these nice heaters, which, by the way, they cost nothing. They're under $200, right? You get a couple of these things, and it's like having summertime while you're looking at snow and watching a game, right? It's just an amazing thing.
That is amazing. I'm loving that. I just discovered in my house, I've been here since '06, but I just discovered last year when I started to meditate, it was part of my New Year's resolution. And I love to sit in the sun and meditate. So January 1st, I go to the back porch because it faces east and that's where the sun is in the morning. And I discovered that even when it's 35 degrees out, it's like 80 degrees in that porch. I had no idea. So I'm not opening the windows because I'm not trying to get that cold air in there. But I spent a lot of my winter in that back porch meditating in the morning. I could take my shirt off and it feels like a summer day. And then I have a little porch on the side of the house that faces the west sky. So that's getting sun in the afternoon. And it gets even warmer in there. So it'll be, again, in the 30s. It's cold out. And now it gets warm enough. It gets 85, 90 degrees in there in the sun in the afternoon. I was in January and February cracking the windows, getting some fresh air in, but sitting there with my shirt off and catching the sun. And for someone like me who, when the seasons change and the days get shorter, I would always have terrible depression. It's better now that I've discovered the ketogenic diet. It still is there, but it doesn't affect me like it used to. But to be able to experience the warmth and have what feels like summer days in January was really amazing for me. It was life-changing. I'm really so glad I found it. And I'm already starting to use both of those porches this year as it gets colder.
It sounds like you have more of a solarium, right? It's closed in with glass or something back there.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, mine is screened. So you have a much better situation than me, but I like the screen because I like the open airness of it. But I could never get that situation that you have. But yeah, the whole thing about, wintertime and depression, right? They even make these lights. Do you have those lights that you can have in your bedroom and everywhere else?
I do, and I have the white ones and the blue ones. I've tried all that over the years.
Have any of them worked to any degree?
They're very ineffective for me. When I was still commuting to the office, and it's that dreadful time of year when we turn the clocks back and I'm driving in the dark and then coming home in the dark, it would be nice to get to work and have the light on my face. And I felt like maybe it helped a little bit, but never that great of an effect.
Nothing like the sunlight, right?
No, not even close. No.
Yeah, I keep, and I guess I'm doing product placements for people. None of these people sponsor me, folks. Like right outside of my office here, I have a solo stove and a rocking chair, and I'll just throw wood in that thing. It could be 30 degrees. And I'll throw wood in a solo stove. And if I have to do phone calls or whatever, I do not like to sit at this desk in this room when I can be right outside in nature, and nothing makes me happier than a fire, right?
Oh, yeah.
I must have been a caveman 5 minutes ago. And,
my wife would say I'm a caveman too. I eat only meat. I'm walking around barefoot.
Can I tell you something? I know we're going to have to go in a minute because I'm sure you don't want to talk to me all day, but about 2 years ago, I told my wife, I was like, I'm thinking about, I probably got 5 or 6 tents over the years, every time you go, I do a lot of backpacking and camping. I got a bunch of those style tents where you can fit it's called a 2-man tent, but it's really a 1-man tent.
Yeah.
It's like, honey, I was thinking about throwing the tent in the backyard. I don't have to build a fire pit. I could just move the solo stove in front of it and bring my Coleman stove out there. I got all the fireplace wood and just live in the backyard for maybe 2 or 3 days at a time and stay away from electronics, set it to where I don't have to do a podcast or be in my office, turn off all electronics. And she laughs about it. She goes, well, why would you do that? I said, because whenever I go camping, I get a different perspective on life. And I love being out there camping and the whole thing. And, it's a different thing. She goes, well, where are you going to keep your food? And I said, inside in the fridge. And she goes, well, that's not really, it's like, yeah, I'm just not going to spend time in the house. I'm going to come inside to the fridge, get what I need, and go right back outside. I don't have to make it a full camping experience, but I could just be out there. No phone, no nothing. Maybe I'll start on a Saturday when I know I have no clients to talk to or whatever, just Saturday and Sunday, and just be out there, just be in nature, except if there's an emergency, you don't have to go, well, he's, out in the Pyrenees, he's right here, right? And she goes, what about going to the bathroom? It's like, I'll come inside and use the facilities and then turn around and go right back outside, right? And just live outside for 2 days. I don't have to go crap in a bucket or dig a hole. I'm not trying to I just want to be away from the comforts of home, right? No television, no radio, no podcast, no books on tape, no nothing, just this. And she thinks it's the craziest thing in the world, but I need to do it at some point. I need to try it.
I think it sounds amazing. It sounds like heaven to me. I wish that I could do that. And that's the kind of thing I'll have to wait until my daughter's probably a little bit older, because, right now my number one priority is her. So we're on a Saturday morning where we might be watching TV, or it's whatever she wants to do. We're playing games and doing arts and crafts. But what you just described sounds really amazing. I try to employ some of those ideas of disconnecting, at least. And that's part of the reason I like meditating so much, because at least even if it's only for 10 minutes at a time, I'm disconnecting from all that stuff. And I go for my walks, and it used to be a time for me to listen to podcasts, but I don't even bring my phone anymore. My wife thinks I'm crazy. Like, well, what if something happens to you? Well, I'm just walking around the neighborhood. Like, if I fall and break my leg or something, I'm going to scream, and there's going to be houses around. I don't really worry about it. I just don't even want to have my phone on me, because I know what's going to happen. I'm going to have an idea, and I might just pick up my phone to say, let me jot this down real quick. But then what do you know? I have a text and I have an email and all this and that. And then I'm spending 15 minutes looking at my phone now. So I just leave it at home. Don't even take it with me.
That's not a bad idea. I don't know if you know this, but about 2 years ago, I had a guy on the show. He was a guy that just set the record of walking across Antarctica. I think it was maybe the Arctic Circle. It could have been Antarctica. He had just broken a record of, just getting from one end to the other. And he realized that he did a lot of it in silence, and just how freeing that was not to have electronics and the whole thing. So he came back and he wrote a book, and the book is called The 12-Hour Walk or something like that. And I had him on a podcast to promote the book, and I found the guy quite intriguing. And it was around this time of year. It was starting to get cold, but it was the last couple of days before we had the shorter days. So it was probably right around this time of year, because next week is daylight savings time, right? We switch back. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do this before it gets god-awful cold. And so it was a Friday when I interviewed the guy. So I told Serena, I said, tomorrow we have anything? She goes, no. I said, okay, I'm going to be gone all day. And I told her what I was doing. I just woke up at, 5 o'clock, ate some breakfast, and put my, walking shoes on, like like the ones you would run in, running shoes, I guess. And the only thing that was in my backpack was water. And for whatever reason, I always do this. I brought a little toilet paper just in case, along the way. And my thought pattern was, I will stay on my feet for the entire 12 hours unless I have to go to the bathroom somewhere. I wasn't going to talk to anyone. Like, if I see someone walking down the street, I was just going to wave to them. No talking, just go in silence. No electronics whatsoever. My phone was in the bottom of my backpack in case I ran into some kind of trouble, right? And I went the whole 12 hours. I ended up learning this new city I was living in, Charlottesville. I walked, my watch showed that I walked X number of steps, which equated to around 36 miles that day.
Wow.
So I just walked, right? The only time I stopped was to refill my water jug or to go into the bushes or behind a tree somewhere to relieve myself. And that was it, right? And I did carry a pencil and a card to write on. And I started having thoughts of things, right? And anytime I had a thought that was different, I jotted it down. Like one of them was that I'm remembering. I used to love rock climbing back in California. And I spent like an hour thinking and romanticizing of being on those. I was at Tequit's and the rock called Suicide, and we went to Yosemite, and we went here and there. And I can almost, even though it was a cold day, I could feel the warmth on my face climbing those rocks and the whole thing. And I said, I've often thought about getting a pair of rock climbing shoes again, because I got rid of all of it when my shoulder got really bad. Now my shoulder's fixed. And I said, I can go to a rock climbing gym again, right? So I wrote down, buy rock climbing shoes within the next week. And within 2 weeks after that or whatever, go to the gym. Go to the rock climbing gym. Start doing it, right? Start doing something. That was one of the things I did. It was easy. I just went and bought rock climbing shoes. Great. And then I had to make a commitment to go to the gym and start using those shoes, right? And there was probably a half dozen things like that I wrote down. And they weren't all that simple. Some of them was call an old friend I hadn't talked to in like 30 years, someone who I used to have a relationship with when we were kids, right? What happened to that person? I had to go look them up, had to find them. There are a lot of things like that. And I think it might be time for me to do another 12-hour walk, right? Because it's really a freeing thing to do that.
That's so incredible. And there's probably a lot of people out there that would say, you're just some crazy, wacky guy. Who would even want to walk for 12 hours? It sounds ridiculous, but I think it sounds amazing. I go on some pretty long walks. There are weeks where I'm working in the afternoon. I don't have to sign in until 1 o'clock. And I'll go out at maybe 10:30 when Samantha's off to school. And I'll walk for about 2 hours or so. It's about as much as I can fit in. And I just love it. It's some of the most freeing time I have. And part of the reason I love starting my morning with a walk is because it just fires my brain off. There's some science there. If you were to see a scan of your brain while you're walking or after you take a walk, the parts of your brain that light up when you're walking. It's also very good for lowering blood sugar for people out there. But I do things like this morning when I was on my walk, rehearsing the intro to my show and kind of imagining how it's going to go. And in my head, I'm having this conversation with you, and this is how I come up with some of these questions and some of my ideas. I feel like it's very, very freeing. I love it. It's liberating.
How's the show gone the way you thought it would go? Or is it way worse than you thought it was going to be?
No, it's been amazing. I have a whole script of questions. I had a whole lot of stuff prepared because I never know what we're going to get to.
Right.
This seems to be the case for every guest that I have on, that I end up crossing off more than I end up asking. That's what usually happens.
There's a book I just read, and I had the woman on the show. I don't think the show came out yet. It's probably coming out this Friday. Andrea Langford. I just interviewed her about a week ago. Lankford. She wrote several books. The one she came on to promote is called Trail of the Lost. And I didn't think I was going to enjoy this book because she's talking about, she was a ranger, forest ranger, and she would go look for people who went missing on the Pacific Coast Trail, right? And just getting into the minds of these people and why people do things like that. Pacific Coast Trail, for anyone who's listening, is like a 2,600 mile trail across the West. It goes from Mexico up to Canada, or from Canada down to Mexico, depending on how you do it. And, she chronicles 3 people who went missing on the trail and their stories, but just to hear why people do what they do and why they, and a lot of times it's people with, they have mental disorders or they can't get their shit together and the whole thing. Same with the AT Trail. That's the same version, but it's here on the East Coast. It's called the Appalachian Trail, but people call it the AT. And you may have seen movies. There's a movie called, I can't remember the name of it, but it has to do with the Camino de Santiago Trail over in Spain. And there's people that just do these pilgrimages and just live out on the trail for months at a time while they're completing it. And it's something you should look into. Yeah, I think you would like it.
I'm definitely going to. And just hearing your story about the 12-hour walk is something that I'm going to take away as making a commitment to do these longer walks. And, I can't do 12 hours, at least, not while I'm trying to be a dad, but I can do longer than my 2 hours. I'm going to start adding this in and really enjoying it.
I'm going to name drop here. My buddy, Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, he goes rucking, he puts a heavier pack than I do. He'll put like a 60-pound pack on his back or something like that and go for 8 miles, which with a 60-pound pack has got to take some significant. And Mike is a busy man, and if he can do that, then anybody can figure it out because Mike Rowe is the busiest human being I know, and he gets that stuff done.
I was just listening to you on your recent show with him as I was prepping for this.
Oh, cool. I hadn't really good.
Yeah, it was great. I haven't really listened to him very much. I remember hearing him like a year or two ago. I can't remember who was on, but after hearing you, I'm gonna go look and see who else he has on and check out some more of his shows because I liked your conversation.
He's a great interviewer.
Yes,
he makes us all look great when he interviews us. So I really appreciate when he has me on.
I'm going to try to get to a couple of the questions that I really wanted to know. So here's one about your career, because you've been a coach, an author, a podcaster, a filmmaker. I want to know, what role or project have you found the most challenging?
Oh, wow. I almost gave a real douchebag answer, but it's the truth. I don't know. The things that, I'm not a filmmaker, right? But I make movies. I've made 4 documentaries now. I don't find those very challenging because I have the right people around me. Right. So it's hard to go, most people, you hear documentarians go, to do a documentary, you pour your life and your heart and your soul into it. To me, it's just like doing a podcast. I know my subject and I know it well. And I go and research, like Dirty Keto is the one that's out right now. You go and you research. So I have the information in my head. And as Mike Rowe said to me, he goes, man, you are really good on a teleprompter. It's like a conversation. It's like, Mike, you're not going to believe this, but I don't use a teleprompter. And he was like, how do you do it? You go long form without it. It's like, yeah, I know what my subject is and I get it all in my head and I do it. So I can't say that that's difficult, right? The podcast is the same way. It's, I don't prep for anyone. There's just no prep. It's just stream of consciousness. So that's not very difficult. Running the vitamin company and the coffee company and the foods company, that's difficult, right? Because now I got to put the businessman hat on and be a businessman. And, sometimes you have to fire people and stuff like that. And you have to do unsavory things. And I'm not good at that. But I have to man up and do them. Probably the most difficult thing is when I'm trying to help people in the consults and they're just not getting it. And I know that they're not getting it. They're going, when I get the yeah buts, it's like, you're not doing it. You're not doing it right. And I think that bothers me more than anything else. That's probably the toughest part is when I feel like I'm yelling into the black hole.
I can relate on a much smaller level than that. I have people all around the world that I'm trying to help increase their fat. I have a Facebook group called the HFBO, or High Fat Beef Only Group, and there's a lot of people coming there that are coming from the Lion Diet, which is Michaela Peterson's, but they're not focused on fat at all. And there are some people, unfortunately, a lot of the people that I am helping they're not mentally well. And so for them to grasp simple concepts like using an app to track and basic math and trying to figure out your fat percentage and everything, it's very, very challenging when people can't really comprehend what you're even trying to throw at them. So on a much smaller scale, I can see how that would be frustrating. One of the things I'd like to do is maybe get certified, maybe start my own coaching business. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to unfold, but I have to figure that out. So you told us what your most challenging thing would be. What do you find? Which role do you find to be the most rewarding?
The same one. Your coaching, because you get to see it, right? You're seeing the results. You know, again, it makes me sound like a douchebag, but you really get to see the results, and nothing beats that, Steve, at all. It's, or when someone says to me, we couldn't get pregnant, and then we started eating right. Doctors couldn't understand why we couldn't get pregnant. Now we have this healthy baby boy. It happened again the other day. That fucks me up, man. That I'll sit there and it's like I'll start weeping. It's like, man, these people wanted to have kids. Yeah, those kind of things are the guy who loses literally 300 pounds and starts running triathlons, or the woman who did something similar. This girl the other day, she's 4'11". Her name is Ashley, and Ashley Pinkle, and she lost, I don't know, for a 4'11" person, she lost 40, 50 pounds doing this, which is a lot for someone that height.
Mm-hmm.
And she just won some age group powerlifting competition. Come on, man. If it doesn't get more rewarding, you can't mail that shit in.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's good stuff,
I think it's fitting that you're saying that the most challenging role is also the most rewarding. That's fitting for the way life goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question about your NSNG. So was there a moment when you realized that it could become a movement rather than just a personal practice or something you're doing on a small scale for clients?
No, I didn't. I didn't have any. I wrote the book. I put the book out there, and in it, I mentioned in the book 10 different times, just cut out sugars, cut out grains, no sugars, no grains, which has been my mantra with all my Hollywood clients since the early 90s, right? You want to lose weight? No sugars, no grains. Well, can I have potato? No sugars, no grains. Can I have no sugars, no grains? So I became known as the no sugars, no grains guy. I didn't trademark NSNG until after the book was out for a good period, and people started doing hashtag NSNG. And I went to the government and said, I need this. This is mine, right? It's in the book. It's here. It's on my website. It's everywhere. And the government does not like to give trademarks on just random letters, right? That's a very tough putt. But we were able to prove that we were using it in commerce, and if the book hadn't been the bestseller that it was, and if the podcast and all that wasn't as big as it was, I think the government would have said, we're not giving you that. But we were able to prove that, it was on the lips of celebrities and everywhere else, and so they went with it.
That's very cool. I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Has your own lifestyle changed over the years? Are you still doing the same thing that you've been doing all along?
Yeah. That's why I think people can consider me authentic. It's like, if you went, I wish I had the old recordings of my radio show from 1989. You'll go, oh my God, this guy hasn't changed. And I tell people, if you think, there's people I've talked to in my early podcasts that were like all in on low carb, and now they're doing something completely different. Doctors and everything else, right?
Right.
They just keep moving around. You could go listen to me in 1989 and listen to me today. I'm the same guy. You're not going to find a different story.
I love it. So here's a question that I ask a lot of my guests is, can you walk us through a typical day of eating for you?
No, but here goes. the morning is always eggs. Eggs are always the cornerstone. Somewhere between 3 and 5 eggs usually. If I'm going on a long hike or something like that, like meaning I'm going to be out for 6 or 7 hours and might do 6 eggs, but between 3 and 5 eggs, and coconut oil. I'll take a nice heaping, spoon of that. The only other calories in the morning would be Knox gelatin, some kind of bone broth or Knox gelatin or something like that. And that's it. I don't eat a lunch per se, but usually after my workout, 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I'll pour olive oil with some Maldon salt into a saucer, and I'll eat some Parmesan cheese and some Romano cheese and maybe a few olives, and I dip them in the salted olive oil, so I'm getting extra fat in. So I eat pretty high fat. Sometimes, with the eggs, I'll do 3 whole eggs and then a 4th yolk. Sometimes I do something like that just to get more fat in there. And then usually there's nothing until dinner, right? And that's when the heavy meat come in, like a lot of meat, sometimes as much as a pound of beef. And that's where like some broccoli might come in or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, my early morning coffee has heavy cream in it, the first coffee in the morning. And then I switched to, I was drinking an espresso when we start this show. I have an espresso machine behind me, and that never has cream in it. It's just espresso. No self-respecting Italian makes any kind of cappuccino drink after the first one in the morning.
That's great. It's funny because you eat very similar to how my daughter's eating. It's eggs and cheese and meat, and it's a great diet. And now I just gonna put it out there that this is not boring for you. This is what you've been doing forever, and you love it, right?
Yeah. And people go, "Oh, it sounds like you eat 3 things." Well, no. Some nights the meat is fish. Some night the meat is lump crab meat and shrimp, that kind of thing. Some nights the meat is pork. And there's 20 different ways. You can have steak. You can have, red meat in the form of ground beef. You can make big taco bowl, and you'll put avocado in that and creme fraiche and some fresh cheese, that kind of thing. So it changes every night, right? Chicken, Serena makes 3 or 4 different chicken dishes that are just out of this world. So the meat changes every night. We're not sitting there. I think people think carnivores just sit there and just house meat all day long. There's so many different kind of meats, fish, seafood, shellfish, on and on and on. So it never gets boring at all. Not for me, at least.
That's great. Yeah. And like you said, there's different ways to prepare the same cut of meat. So you could take something like a bottom round, which would normally be used for a roast, and you can cook it like a pot roast and keep it in a water bath for like 6 hours and make a pot roast out of it. Or you could slice it into steaks and pan sear it or put it on the grill. You could also cook it in a sous vide. And if you do it for like 24 hours, it might come out closer to a prime rib would. And it can never, for me at least, it can never get boring doing it that way.
Do you ever listen to my podcast at all?
So I was a big podcast consumer years ago, and then I kind of found my own path. And then what I've been doing the past couple of months is I spend a lot of time either prepping for guests, so listening to who I'm going to have on, or I'm now pursuing how to grow a YouTube channel, how to start a coaching business. So I have other interests that I'm spending my time listening to. So for you, I haven't listened to you much except for recently in the past week or 2 that I've been preparing for our interview.
So I play this on my podcast quite often. Can I play something for you? For your podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. And when people go, "Oh, meat gets boring," this is Sam Elliott doing a commercial for the beef industry. It also proves that Sam Elliott could read the phone book and sound interesting. So listen to this commercial, if you don't mind.
Beef stroganoff, beef bourguignon, Irish beef stew, beef brisket, Chateaubriand, sauerbraten, roast beef, Catalonian beef ragout, Mongolian beef, chicken fried steak, steak Diane, grilled steaks balsamico, hamburgers, sizzling beef, spicy braised beef, barbecued beef ribs, beef Wellington, pepper beef, beef jerky, beef with broccoli, beef burritos, beef fajitas, beef tacos. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's just beef, right? He didn't even get into everything else, right? Like, sausage, like everything you could do with pork, everything you could do with chicken, everything you could do with fish. That's just a few beef dishes, right? So people go, don't you ever get bored? It's like, no, we did a chili last night, like and it's not like a chili with beans and everything. It's just a beef chili. Yeah. There's tons of ways to skin that cat. And
That's right.
It just never gets boring. Not for me, at least.
That's great. All right, so here I got one for you. This is something interesting that I'm wondering if you can answer this. So is there a question that you wish people would ask you, but they never do?
Oh, wow. No, because I think I've been asked. It's almost like I've been asked every question about my life. Yeah. I wish my family would ask me more how I do it, but they don't want to hear it. Your family don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
But that's about it. My life has been an open book ever since I wrote a book about my life, putting everything in there. I just, so there's nothing someone hasn't asked me that I know of. And, I'm going to get off of this podcast and go, oh yeah, that was that one thing, that one time. I wanted someone to ask me about how big my member was or something. No, I don't know.
Are there any misconceptions about NSNG? Anything that frustrates you even after all these years of promoting it?
Yeah, people think, oh, you're telling people to eat cholesterol and you're going to kill people with this high cholesterol way of eating, and they'll even say, well, coconut oil is a saturated fat, so you'll get cholesterol poisoning. Number one, you can't be poisoned by the fat cholesterol that every cell in your body needs to live on. Number two, there's zero cholesterol in coconut oil. Yeah, people say if you eat fat, you're going to get fat. Those kind of, and you can't blame the general public for that at all. You just can't, because, every sitcom when I was growing up, they would walk into a steak restaurant. It's like, oh, the ribeye is 18 ounces. Does that come with a cardiologist? It's like the joke has been there forever, so it's hard to get past that.
Yeah, it's the way that we've been taught forever.
Yeah.
All right, I want to get into our closing questions here. So I have a couple of questions that would be posed to your younger self. And the first one is related to diet. And I usually say for mental health, but for you, it could be diet and fitness. What is a piece of advice you'd give to your younger self before you discovered this diet? Something along the lines of how to get through the tough times.
I would have eaten more fat back then. I was more, like under the spell of the bodybuilding thing of eat lean protein. Like I wasn't even eating. That was a period of time back when where, I was eating like only white meat chicken, and I got to where I couldn't eat another can of tuna fish. And, even in my protein smoothies, and I do not recommend anyone do this because you could get salmonella. I've given myself salmonella by doing this, but I would have, raw eggs in a blender. And if I did a dozen raw eggs in a blender, I would only put like 5 or 6 of the yolks, and the rest was just the egg whites. I would have left all the yolks in, I would have had more fat, because as it turns out, when you have fat, you have more energy. And so what I would have to do is add carbohydrates, like before the gym, eat a bowl of rice, right? And that kind of thing. I would have done less carbs and more fat.
So my second question is, again, posed to your younger self, but not necessarily related to diet or mental health or anything. It's just a life lesson. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Buy Amazon sooner and have more Apple stock sooner. Advice I would have given my younger self: don't play football. I mean, my body's beat to crap from all the years. Football is a love-hate thing for me because I was able to get a college degree because of football. My family couldn't really afford to send me to college. I would have gone to some small state school or whatever, and I probably wouldn't have ever gotten out of the swamp. So that would have been one piece of advice I give my younger self. I would have, I don't know. I'm not going to say a stupid thing, wear sunscreen, because I still believe sunscreen will kill you. I'm so glad I never took steroids and all that kind of stuff, because it was all right there and it was all readily available. So if I was telling someone else's young self, don't take this stuff, don't take the drugs. I'm glad I never did any drugs. Still 62, I've never smoked a joint. So I'm happy that my young self knew not to do that stuff.
I can relate to the love-hate relationship that you had with football, because that's what I had with powerlifting, because it was, for years, it was the only thing providing me any relief. But I screwed up my SI joint and my lower back goes out, and I've got, the pain in my shoulder and my elbow, and I've got a hip that gives me a problem from time to time. As long as I stay on the diet, I don't really notice these things very much. But for the years that I was still figuring things out, and I would go eat wheat and I would eat things that my body reacts to, I would feel all those injuries come right back. But I wouldn't change it, because I loved it, and it did provide me relief for years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing, how some of that stuff that we use to help us along the way ends up hurting later on. But I guess it's all, just battle scars.
So this brings us to what I call my signature question. It's a question that encourages guests to share a broader, more philosophical insight or a life lesson that ties into your experience with the ketogenic diet, hopefully providing something meaningful and potentially new even after our in-depth interview. So I call this my fat-fueled philosophy question. What's one powerful piece of fat-fueled philosophy, a life lesson or mantra that you've embraced on your ketogenic journey and that you think could inspire our listeners?
Wow. Well, that's a tough question. Because, I've been doing this for so long. One of the things that I tell people is, I get it that if you're addicted to sugar or whatever, just having that on your tongue is going to feel good for a couple of seconds, but the ripple effect is going to hurt you down the road, right? The other thing I tell people is, try to find one friend to go along with you on your journey, because I know when I was taking things like algebra that I wasn't very good at. I wasn't good at all the math stuff outside of basic math. But I found that if I taught someone else how to do it, I would remember it, right? So if you can find someone to go on your journey with you, a husband, a wife, a good friend, a coworker, where you guys can keep each other accountable. That's why we started that accountability group at VinnieTortorich.com. It's called Vinnie Tortorich VIP group, because people need to be accountable to someone else. And even if you're helping someone else, you're going to be helping yourself. So that's probably the most important thing you can do, is make sure that, the ripple effect of that sugar, even though it tastes good in your mouth right now, the ripple effect it goes on for a long time. Just know that. Right. So that's the biggest key here. Number 2, always have someone there, someone to work with. And by the way, that's the way, if you know anyone that's in a 12-step program, the way it works is you have a partner, right? You coach someone else. It works like a charm.
I am huge on accountability because it works so well for me. And I was heavily involved in AA before I discovered the ketogenic diet. And I had my own sponsor and I had sponsees, and there was a bunch of young guys my age, and we were all heavily involved, and it worked very, very well for us. Right now I have a Discord group with a couple of close friends, and we have a fasting group. So we fast a couple days a week and we keep each other accountable. It's huge. And part of the reason that I wanted to branch out and have this YouTube podcast and be on social media is that it helps hold me accountable to the public. I'm out there trying to spread the message of hope and show people what I'm doing, but I'm not perfect and I do mess up. And this whole thing helps me stay accountable. It works very, very well.
And I love hearing that. And that's what it's all about. So keep up the great work, man.
Thank you. So I got one more thing left to do. Now, I know you've probably never seen any of my shows, so you don't know what I do at the end, right?
No idea.
Oh, that's perfect. That's great. So I've got my tenets in life, and one of them is to have fun and enjoy life. So I'm going to put on my rapper persona here because we don't have to be so serious all the time.
Oh my God, look at it. You look like Ali G a little bit.
All right, so I've got my tagline for the show, and I normally would do it like this. I'd say, fix yourself with fat. So what I've been doing is asking all of my guests to do the tagline for us in their own unique and enthusiastic way. And then I'm going to put a compilation together.
So I'm going to say, fix yourself with fat. Is that what you want me to say?
Yeah, with, in your own unique way. You seem like the perfect guy that can do it with some enthusiasm. Fix yourself with fat. That's how I do it.
Okay, but I don't have to do it like that. I could do my own thing.
I want you to do it in your own way. Yeah.
Okay, tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready for you.
Right now?
Yeah.
Fix yourself with fat.
That was perfect. That was perfect. I love it.
I love this. I love that you have the chains and the whole thing.
That was good. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It was a really great time talking to you. I probably have like 100 questions I didn't ask.
That's all right.
I thought it was a great conversation.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, man. And
I really appreciate it.
And I wish you luck with everything you're doing. And if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know.
You're already helping me. You know how many people are going to be excited to see this? A lot.
Well, that makes me feel good. Thanks.
'Cause you're big. You're really big out there, and you're my first really big guest. I've had well-known people in the mental health community, but nobody nearly as big as you. So yeah, it's going to be a big boost.
You're too kind, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks. You too.
All right.